I feel thanks. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with colleagues our findings on this work that we've been doing. As we mentioned, I'm from Manchester Metropolitan University. We teach primarily in the course of biomedical sciences. And my colleagues and myself, which unfortunately cannot be with us today, co-presenting Dr. Chuyu Wang, Dr. Kate Hargreaves, and myself, have been playing with the data that we got after the last academic year. What we wanted to find out, it was the impact and the differences that makes having AI disclosures in the assessment briefs, not only, of course, as part of the general use of AI in these courseworks, but also as part of the marking scheme or not, as we had. So I'll say I'm not sure if we really need the introduction about using AI in coursework. Of course, we had amazing presentations already. We're all very tuned and it feels like preaching to the choir. But of course, the use of AI has changed how students engage with coursework, how they engage with university. And what is really important is, as mentioned before, that we are sure that the academic integrity that should be in these courses still prevails, the same as transparency and fairness. And one of the unexpected outcomes, and I'll tell you more about this, is about the student well-being. How can AI being used in assessments can help or hinder the student well-being? So it's not always good. So the use of generative AI tools, of course, brings the question of what is fair. Is it fair to use? How much it is fair? We have guidelines at Manchester Med. We have both resources for staff and students to train on AI literacy. For students as well, is part of our extracurricular program, which is RISE, which give additional points and badges for employability. So they are their students really engage with this, both because they want to win to get the new skills on AI literacy, but also obviously, there are some brownie points of getting these points on and digital badges and micro credentials. What is important here to highlight is what is fair use, not only in terms of our academic integrity, but also particularly for those courses that are accredited by professional bodies, which is our case. In the UK, as you might know, to be a biomedical scientist, you need to graduate from a program accredited by Institute of Biomedical Sciences, IBMS. We're also accredited by the Royal Society of Biology in some of our courses. And that brings the question of how do we know that the grades and the knowledge that your students and your graduates are saying they really have, and it's not because they just ask AI to prepare an essay for them. We have discussions in previous sessions as well about how much can we de-skill. And of course, as professionals, we can use AI easily to draft emails instead of spending more time trying to get the message right. But we've had those skills for many years. We have polished them. Whereas for students, particularly those in first, second year, they're just developing the skills. So is it fair to use AI as much rather than gain the skills, understand where is everything coming from, and then apply AI? And this is why we use the assessment that we already have in 2 units. So what we use were our students in 2 programs, the bachelors in biomedical science and the ones in health science. They take these 2 models the same, which are infection science and cellular science. The difference is that for infection science, one of the coursework, one of the assessment is a coursework, a lab report. And in the lab report is very clear that use of AI is permitted, as much as the university guidelines say, ethically fair. However, it needs to be disclosed, and it is part of the marking scheme. So whether you use it or not, you have to disclose, I did use AI for so and so and so and these tools, or I didn't use AI at all. Whereas in our second model, cellular science, one of the assessments is an essay, and students are not asked to disclose the use of AI as part of the marking scheme. In this marking scheme, we use the part of academic practice to integrate the use of AI disclosure and the references. So they came together, and what we did is those who did not disclose, they will fail this part of the component, which is only 10% of the overall marking scheme. So whether you use it or not, you have to tell us. If you don't, then you fail this. And of course, then it's up to the quality of the referencing, of course, adhering to our referencing style at the university and bringing the details of the use of AI. What we found is that from all our submissions, we had 282 students in our second year last year. And you would expect, if this is compulsory as part of the marking scheme, you would expect all students would either disclose or not the use of AI. All students would say, yes, I use it, or not, I didn't, right? So in this case, we didn't. We found that only 65% of students disclosed that. And from those, 41% said, yes, I use it, and gave some details. 22% said, no, I didn't use it. But they did what we asked them to. They disclosed whether they use it or not. Very interestingly, as I said, in cellular science, we didn't ask them to disclose if they use it. But it turned out that 7% disclose. Why they use it? Well, part is, we think, is because, of course, in our other module infection science, they've been told to use it. So those students that are very driven, that very compliant in terms of what they're being asked, they thought like, well, maybe in one model they're asking me, in this one they're not, but I think I will disclose, particularly those who use it, who are 14. What's interesting then was our the assessment grades and marks. And this here you will see in blue those marks for the infection science, where we asked them would they had to disclose use of AI or not. In the orange one, cellular science, where it was optional. Of course, before we go into further analysis, I have to say that this has been made just at the level of disclosure or not. We need further analysis because we know we have a very intersectional cohort. So whether gender, disability, ethnicity play a role in this, we need to find out. But if we just go by the grades, we will look at the blue ones from infection science. We can see very clearly that the cohort average was 61%. Now, if we take those that did not disclose, the average for those was 52%, which is a full boundary, a full classification down. You might say, well, of course, if you did not disclose, automatically you are not getting that 10% of your referencing academic practice marking part. Actually some students were very upset, and we had that discussion with the feedback, and we said, well, even if you disclose use of AI, there's no guarantee you would have gotten that 10%, because the 10% is when a student superbly uses references, the referencing style, and of course the disclosure of AI. But whether you didn't use the right style, or whether your papers, your journals were not relevant or up to date, that might be a case where you do not get the 10%. So that's really interesting. And then we see, of course, that for those who disclose, they have a higher average grade at 66. So really getting close to that first classification for our undergrads. Now, what we see when we look at the grades in cellular science, we did have, and the disclosures, we did have a very small sample for that. But in cellular science, pretty much the average between those who disclose and the average of the cohort was not significant. However, it was important for those who disclose. And we can see that we can argue that also is because students who take the time to read through the assessment brief, to read through the marking scheme, obviously are paying more attention to the details and what we're asking, and that will impact on the marks. We also look at which tools they use, and you can see that ChatGPT continues to be one of the favorites, even though the university highly encourages the use of Copilot. Why? Because we know that with the higher education license, all the information that is used in Copilot through our university accounts is still encrypted and is not used to train models. So that will protect the data of students and staff, and that's why Copilot is encouraged. We see here something around 10% using Copilot, not as much definitely as ChatGPT, and we also had an important proportion that didn't disclose which tools they use. When we ask why did you use AI tools, we can see that they use it for understanding scientific content. So there's a variety, particularly in cellular science, for the structure of an essay. The infection science was a lab report. So that's a very, very simple structure to work with. Whereas with the cellular science, students needed more support in terms of how do I put my information across. Grammar and spelling, which you still see a lot, even though we also have Grammarly. Improving writing, particularly for international students, they have disclosed personally that that's one of the use. What is important is that we have some uses only used for infection science for the lab report. So information finding, data analysis, of course. The essay in cellular science didn't require data analysis, but when it's needed, they are just going and say, this is the data, could you do some data analysis? Understanding the assessment is also important. A little bit discouraging for colleagues, because we would have thought that we were clear enough when we were explaining the assessment. But of course, some students might not have been around for the session, might miss it for whatever circumstance. So understanding assessment is also one of the uses. What are the implications for our academic practice? Well, I think we know now is very clear. We need to have supportive AI and disclosure policies. We have to be very clear. DonB&B was about what we expect of students. As I said, last year, we had different takes on these two models, and that is because we were not homogenizing the take, even though we had the university guidelines and we were informing students, and that was part of the assessment brief. It's not part of the marking scheme for all our assessments, and that is something that we need to be clear about. Of course, training staff to guide the students and to use ethically AI, and that is something that we've been doing, as I mentioned, AI literacy for students, for staff, as well with Adobe Creative. So not only the use of AI, but also the images. We also need to consider how we design the assessments and the marking schemes. How can we accommodate AI, particularly for those assessments from accredited programs? What would be the impact? So have the conversation with professional bodies. How can we integrate this? And obviously how this will be changing across the different years of study. And of course, support students, ensure that they feel supported, informed, and treated fairly in this evolving digital. So I mentioned before the impact of student well-being, and that was not the initial scope of this study that we did. We were just looking at what's the impact in grades. But it came across that, of course, well-being was very important with AI. And as we know, assessments are a major source of stress and anxiety for students. And the introduction of AI, of course, is adding a new layer. Why? And we did say it could be good, it could be not so good. This new layer of complexity of using AI and well-being. It could help to reduce their anxiety, as we saw some students use it to clarify assessment, to make sure that I got the assessment right, I know what I'm doing. But equally, we're having conversations with the students that say, it is not fair. I spent 3 weeks working on this essay. I know the topic. I went through all the work. What we say, the very squiggly path to get from the assessment brief into my submission. And I know colleagues sitting next to me who use AI, got really good at prompt engineering. So they were really good at asking the AI model to provide the essay, and they got a very similar mark to me. They haven't learned what I learned. They have not gone through this process, engaged meaningfully, and they are getting the same. So you can see how that feeling of unfairness comes across with the students. And again, it's something we need to be very, very aware of. And of course, we will need.
Arada, so sorry, just to jump in, if you could start to wrap it up, because we've kind of run over time there. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So I was to conclude, we would need the right policies to make sure that both staff and students are aware of what is expected of them. I think that is one of the main challenges: expectations, managing expectations, communicating expectations both ways. And thank you very much for your time.